Before diving into this incredible story, consider subscribing to the channel and hitting the bell. Every story here has something to say, and you won't want to miss a single one. Greenville was a typical small town in the American South, with streets lined with clapboard houses, manicured lawns, and cafes that opened their doors at dawn. At first glance, everything seemed calm, almost idyllic. But beneath this apparent tranquility, a dull unease hung in the air, a racial tension long ignored by many, but very present in the glances exchanged, the awkward silences, and the invisible barriers erected between communities. The majority of Greenville's residents were white, descendants of early settlers, proud of their traditions and sometimes reluctant to change. The African American community, though respectful and hardworking, was often sidelined, treated with distant politeness, even latent suspicion. In this context, Officer Mark Thompson embodied a certain brutal form of authority. Since his arrival at the police station, his reputation was well established. A tough man with an explosive temper, he did not hesitate to use his power to assert his control, particularly over those he considered inferior. He saw himself as a pillar of order, a bulwark against chaos, but his gaze was hard, often tinged with condescension, especially towards African Americans. Mark was the kind of man who believed the law was above all else, but for him, that law applied differently depending on the color of one's skin. This belief was reinforced by a work environment where some colleagues shared, without ever saying it out loud, this same skepticism about change. That summer morning, as the sun barely broke through the leaves, Mark patrolled a neighborhood on the edge of Greenville. This area was one of the few where black and white families still lived side by side, a fragile mosaic of coexistence. Suddenly, Mark spotted a man coming out of a small local cafe, one of those popular spots for a morning coffee and a quiet conversation. The man was black, in his 30s, dressed in a simple but impeccably tailored suit, his shirt collar straight, his shoes polished. He walked with a quiet confidence, his head held high, an aura of natural dignity that contrasted with the hustle and bustle of the street. Mark frowned uncomfortably. He didn't like this kind of presence, especially at this early hour when the city was supposed to be slowly waking up. He put his car in reverse and braked sharply next to the man. "Hey, you," he said curtly, lowering the window. The man stopped, his calm eyes meeting Mark's hard ones. "What are you doing here at this hour? Show me your papers." There was an order in Mark's voice, a demand that could not be refused. But Daniel Harris, the man opposite him, showed no fear. He raised his hands slightly, not in submission, but to signal his calm and control of the situation. "Hello, my name is Daniel Harris. I'm here for an important meeting at the sheriff's office. May I ask why you're asking for my ID?" Mark narrowed his eyes, suspicious. "You're new here, I definitely don't know you. And I'm not obligated to answer your questions. Give me your papers now." Daniel slowly took out his ID, his gaze never leaving Mark's. Mark grabbed the card abruptly, looked at it quickly, his expression hardening. "Do you take me for a fool? You have no business being in this neighborhood if you don't have business here." Daniel raised his head, his voice firm but respectful. "I have just been appointed chief of police of Greenville. I am here to restore order and establish justice." Mark burst out into a dry, contemptuous laugh. "Chief of police? You? This is a joke, right?" The laughter turned into a more aggressive tone. "Do you think your appointment will change anything here? We do what we want in this city." Without warning, Mark placed a firm hand on Daniel's shoulder, seeking to physically intimidate him. Daniel turned around slowly, still calm. "Take your hand away, Agent Thompson." But Mark insisted, pressing harder. "You're not the boss here. You'll see how we make the law." At that precise moment, a young white woman, Emily Carter, was passing by. She watched the scene, her unease growing. She discreetly took out her phone and began filming. "Hey, stop that!" Mark protested, noticing the phone, but it was already too late. The siren wailed in the distance, cutting through the morning noise of Greenville. Within minutes, a second patrol car arrived on the scene, pulling up alongside. From it stepped a determined woman, Lieutenant Karen Mitchell. She was in her 50s, with short, neatly styled hair, a piercing gaze, and a stature that commanded respect. Karen was a white police officer, known for her integrity and strong principles. For years, she had tried to maintain a difficult balance in a precinct often divided by internal tensions. "What's going on here?" Agent Thompson, she asked sharply, walking towards the group. Emily Carter, the young woman who had just filmed the scene, quickly approached, brandishing her phone. You should look at this, Lieutenant. Without hesitation, Karen picked up the phone and started the video. Silence fell as the image unfolded. Mark's abrupt movements, his harsh voice, his physical contact with Daniel. It was all there. Karen felt a mixture of shock and anger rise within her. She knew Mark Thompson, knew he could be difficult, but this time, it was something else. The assault was blatant, unjustified. She lowered the phone and turned her head towards Daniel, who had just calmly taken out an official card, visible to everyone. Lieutenant Mitchell, I'm Daniel Harris, the new police chief. I officially assume my duties today. A heavy silence fell over the scene. Karen stared at Daniel, her eyes wide open, thinking. Daniel Harris, she whispered slowly, a note of admiration evident in her voice. She had heard about him, his exemplary career, his ambitious plans to reform the Greenville police force. That day, a major change seemed to be on the horizon, but it wouldn't be without obstacles. Later, in his office, Daniel stared out the large window overlooking Greenville's Main Street. Sunlight filtered through the blinds, illuminating the walls decorated with diplomas and family photographs. He had become the first black man to lead the police force in this historic city, and he felt the full weight of that responsibility. Born into a modest Southern family, he had grown up on the same streets as those he would now serve and protect. At a very young age, he had seen the injustices, the contemptuous stares, the arbitrary arrests that plagued his community. After serving several years in the Army Special Forces, where he acquired discipline and rigor, Daniel chose another fight, to transform the Greenville police force. His goal was clear, to build an institution that protects all citizens, without exception, and that respects the dignity and rights of each individual. But this incident with Mark Thompson was a stark reminder that the road ahead would be long. Mark embodied that old mentality, the deep-rooted arrogance, the latent racism that some still refused to challenge. Daniel knew he would have to fight not only the offenders, but also the resistance to change in his own department. He clenched his fists in determination. I will make sure that justice is no longer a privilege for some, but a right for all, he promised himself. He knew the next few days would be decisive. Every decision, every word, every action could change the future of Greenville. Daniel summoned Mark to his office, a simple but well-organized space featuring a solid oak desk, a few chairs, and a whiteboard covered with strategic notes. Natural light illuminated the room, but a palpable tension hung in the air. Mark entered, head bowed, his hesitant steps betraying an unusual nervousness. He had never been summoned like this by a superior, much less by such a young, and, more importantly, black police chief. He sat down without a word, carefully avoiding Daniel's gaze. Agent Thompson, Daniel began in a firm but calm voice. Your behavior this morning is not only unacceptable, but it clearly violates several of our department's protocols. Even more seriously, you disrespected a superior officer. Mark felt heat rise in his face. He looked down, knowing that this time there was no argument that would hold water. I understand, Chief Harris, he whispered, his voice hoarse. I'm sorry, I really am. Daniel nodded, not satisfied or angry, just a deep determination. What I want you to understand, Mark, is that you have a critical role. You're not just a man in uniform enforcing the law as he sees fit. You're here to protect every person in Greenville, without exception. You must learn not to fuel the tensions that are fracturing our community, but to ease them. He paused, trying to gauge the impact of his words. We will be holding training sessions on unconscious bias, nonviolent communication, and conflict management. You will participate, and I expect you to be sincere in your approach. Mark nodded, more in resignation than enthusiasm. He knew the days when he could act with impunity were over. He also felt, deep down, a mixture of anxiety and the beginnings of introspection. The following weeks were a turning point. Daniel, through his calm and determined leadership, introduced gradual but solid changes. He organized meetings between police officers and members of the African American community, creating open spaces for dialogue where everyone could express their fears, hurts, and hopes. The training sessions proved difficult for some, especially Mark, who had to confront his own deep-rooted prejudices. But, day by day, he began to see things differently. The stories of the locals, their suffering, and their desire for peace touched him. He learned to listen, to stop judging too quickly, to show empathy. Gradually, the Greenville police changed. Complaints of abusive behavior decreased. Arbitrary arrests were less frequent. And, most importantly, the historic mistrust between the Black community and law enforcement began to lessen. Mark, despite his tumultuous beginnings, became an unexpected but valuable ally in this transformation. He understood that the true strength of a police officer lay not in intimidation or violence, but in trust and mutual respect. One evening, at a public meeting in the packed municipal hall, Daniel took the stage. Facing an audience that included police officers, white and Black residents, local officials, and young community leaders, he spoke with calm authority. Justice is not a privilege reserved for a few. It is a fundamental right that we must guarantee to all, without exception. It is not just a question of law, but a question of humanity. A murmur of approval rippled through the room, soon replaced by warm applause. Daniel looked around the crowd, seeing a glimmer of hope in their eyes. He concludes, "Together, we can build a police force we can all be proud of, an institution that protects, listens, and unites. Change is possible, but it requires commitment from all of us." That day, Daniel Harris not only became Greenville's police chief, he became a living symbol of dignity, courage, and hope for a city yearning to heal its wounds.